Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown, horns247.com, joined as always by our managing editor, Taylor Estes. Taylor, how you doing?
I am doing all right, Chip. How about you?
You know, a little sinus infection, but other than that, we are neck deep into the college football season. And for Texas fans, they don't know whether to laugh or cry coming off of this incredible game against Alabama in which Texas had opportunities to take down the number one team in the country, Taylor. And now they're dealing with the aftermath. The aftermath.
The injury aftermath, too.
The injury aftermath. Quinn Ewers has a sternoclavicular sprain, and that is a sprain of the joint that connects the clavicle and the sternum. Hudson Card has a high ankle sprain, and Bijan Robinson is nursing a shoulder injury, and Deshaun Jameson, the fifth-year senior cornerback who left the game in the first half, is dealing with a left ankle injury. And, here comes the UTSA Roadrunners, coached by that East Texas legend, Jeff Traylor, who used to be an assistant coach at Texas under Charlie Strong in 2015 and 2016. And Taylor, Texas may be going into this game with third-string quarterback Charles Wright. Initial thoughts?
I mean, it's the least ideal situation for Texas, I would say. And I'm not trying to knock Charles Wright or anything, but if you go back to last season, he was not even third string quarterback as a scholarship quarterback. There was a walk-on, Ben Ballard, that was on the travel squad. And I know you asked Steve Sarkisian on Monday during his press conference about the progress of Charles Wright, and he did state that he has come a long way from year one to year two. But this is like the worst case scenario, right? I mean, it's not like UTSA is some scrub team. They're a legit team. I mean, they went toe to toe with Houston to open the season. They ended up losing in a 3 overtime game. They, went into a battle with Army on the road at Army and ended up winning in week 2. And they're the reigning Conference USA champs. I mean, this is a perfect storm for disaster, honestly, for Texas. Now, at the end of the day, though, Chip, what matters the most for Texas is conference play. So if the Longhorns are in a position to rely on Charles Wright or even incorporate more of the Wildcat with Roschon Johnson being back there, whatever it is, you hope, though, that you give the ample time for rest for Hudson Card and for Quinn Ewers before Big 12 play, because that's really when everything matters. That's my initial take. What about yours?
Yeah, I mean, so I find this fascinating because Texas had a really pretty complete performance against Alabama defensively. They give up the big 81-yard run, but that was pretty much the most egregious big play given up. For the most part, they were good against the run and held Alabama, a team that's been averaging 40 points, to 20. So if the defense can continue to play like this and you can get a game managing performance from Charles Wright, who Steve Sarkisian and teammates said has come along, has progressed. He was a true freshman last year and was lost like a true freshman you would expect.
Right.
And he's a grinder. So he's a guy who gets in the film room and studies and learns and figures it out and catches up. So he's caught up now. Now he's the number 3 guy. Malik Murphy, who we've pretty much consistently been saying here on the Flagship Podcast, is going to redshirt this season because he had the ankle injury suffered in his state championship game in California. He had ankle surgery, and so they're going slow with him this year.
Yeah, he has yet to go through full reps in spring ball or fall camp. I mean, he may be in individual position drills, but not when it came to team periods.
Right. And his time is coming, but his time is not right now. So Charles Wright, in his second year in this offense, seems to have the trust and the confidence of coaches and teammates. And this kid's an AISD product. Um, that's like a big deal. I mean, obviously Westlake and Lake Travis, that's one thing it seems. But a quarterback from Austin High, which has not been a perennial power of any sort, this is quite an accomplishment. So I'm fascinated because you're right, Taylor. This is a ambush in waiting for the Roadrunners. I mean, if Texas doesn't come out and continue to play at the level they were playing at against Alabama, they're going to be in a fourth quarter game and they might be trying to kick a field goal to win it. That's how much belief UTSA has in their system, their coach, their fifth-year senior quarterback, Frank Harris, who all the guy does is battle and never say die. And, they brought in Traylon Smith, the transfer running back from Arkansas, who scored a touchdown against Texas last year as a Razorback. And they have 3 dynamite receivers. Dynamite. They have a 1,000-yard receiver who caught 12 touchdowns last year, just like, Xavier Worthy didn't even get to 1,000 yards. He did catch 12 touchdowns. So, and now, Bijan Robinson's got this shoulder injury. He says he's going to be fine by midweek. I'm hearing maybe we don't overextend Bijan Robinson this week and we put the load on Roschon Johnson and Jonathan Brooks, which is fine. Those guys are totally capable. But
Yeah.
you just don't want to be without all your horsepower, and Texas probably not going to play Deshaun Jameson either. Is going to be without some horsepower. So they really need to get to the point where they're playing to their own standard, the standard that they established in that Alabama game, and not the roller coaster play up to the competition, play down to the competition, because there's no playing down to the competition this week. This is a UTSA team that will come in just like Texas was approaching Alabama and see this as a golden opportunity for them to continue their bragging rights, which they proudly pronounced last year as UTSA being the best college football team in the state of Texas last year, which was accurate.
You think
So,
more than Baylor?
I mean, I would like to have seen that game.
Yeah, that would have been a good game for sure.
But I think this is going to be a really fun game. And if Texas can play to the standard that they did against Alabama, then they'll handle business. If they don't, they'll be in a fourth quarter game fighting for their lives.
Yeah, it's going to come down to the defense because the reality is you can't expect a lot out of Charles Wright. You can't expect him to be in a position to put the game on his shoulders and lead this offense in the same way that Quinn Ewers or Hudson Card could. And again, that's not a knock on Charles Wright. It's just it's the facts. I think, I mean, Charles Wright, after Jalen Milroe, decommitted from the 2021 class, ended up, going to Alabama. Charles Wright was the scramble effort of Tom Herman and Mike Yursich and the previous coaching staff to get a quarterback in the 2021 signing class. And I think Jalen Milroe decommitted, and then 5 days later, I think it was less than a week later, they offered Charles Wright. He committed the same day. And so, he's been really, far behind, obviously. I think you mentioned not a knock on Austin High football, but it's not the same as Westlake or Lake Travis in, this area here in Austin. So this is a game where the defense has to come out and really just take charge, Chip, because the best case scenario is to put the offense in the best position possible to be effective, and the defense has a chance to do that, especially up front. If you missed our flagship podcast interview with Jeff Traylor from Monday, go back and listen to it. Head coach of UTSA, he joined us game week, which is awesome, and we really appreciated him taking the time to talk to us. But I think he kind of alluded to the fact that the offensive line is a little bit of a moving target, probably a little bit for opposing defenses, that UTSA has with them. Was it both tackles that he said? I thought, yeah, both
Yeah,
tackles
the
that they
top
have.
4 tackles on the team are out right
Yeah.
now.
Okay. So there you have it.
They
So
have a
this is
walk-on and a guard playing the tackle positions.
okay. So that's where Texas has a major advantage. Texas did a really good job for, especially comparing the defensive front last season against Alabama. I mean, I think that in total, I think they had like 10 QB hurries or something, and ended up finishing with 2 sacks against a really elite offensive line and quarterback in Bryce Young in Alabama. So if they can replicate that and get after UTSA, the front seven on the Texas defense getting after that offensive front that UTSA has, that is a huge key to this game, in my opinion, Chip.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. The pressure that Texas was able to get on Bryce Young, this is going to be very similar because Frank Harris can run,
Mhm.
and he'll run by design. Bryce Young ran on a scramble and hurt Texas. Frank Harris will run by design, and he is a guy who threw for 27 touchdowns with 6 interceptions last year, but averaged almost 6 yards a carry, and had over 500 yards rushing last year, and 6 rushing touchdowns. So this is a guy who, and look, mobile quarterbacks, dual threat quarterbacks, running quarterbacks, it seems have been giving Texas trouble for years, whether it was Mac Brown, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, or Steve Sarkisian. So that's always going to be a test because they can outnumber the defense when the quarterback is a runner. And this is a guy, Frank Harris, who's from the state of Texas, from the San Antonio area, who has bought into this Jeff Traylor culture of 2-1-0 and the single digit guys. So Jeff Traylor's single digit guys, they vote as a team on who gets single digit uniforms on offense and defense. Frank Harris got every vote. So he got first choice. He picked 0. On defense, Rashad Wisdom, their all conference safety, got all the votes. He picked 0 for the defense.
And Steve Sarkisian called him the quarterback of that defense.
Yes, that guy is everywhere, and they're just smart. They play clean football. They rarely beat themselves. They rarely make the big mistake. They did have a protection bust against Houston that led to a Frank Harris getting hit as he threw. The interception fluttered. It was costly. They were up 21-7 in that game. That interception allowed Houston to tie the game 21-21 in a game that UTSA probably should have been driving for a 2-touchdown lead. Instead, the game is tied and it ends up in overtime and they lose. And Traylor will tell you that they felt like Texas did against Alabama, that they had that game won, that they were the better team, and it got away and it stung. And then had to go to Army and play that's a 9-win Army team from last year with its quarterback back and a triple option running attack. And you don't ever go play Army voluntarily. Like, I asked Traylor, who schedules Army, especially under, Jeff Monken, who's done such a good job there the last 9 years. And he said, oh, we just had to sell out to stop the run. We gave up way too many yards passing. They gave up 300 yards passing, but they were not going to get, death by 1,000 cuts against Army's running attack. So they did, stuff that running attack to 3.3 yards per carry. They know how to stop the run. And Texas is going to have to beat UTSA through the air, and they're beatable. Their corners are not proven. Question is, can Charles Wright deliver that kind of game plan? And will Steve Sarkisian trust him to deliver that kind of game plan? Because we saw the game plan change when Quinn Ewers went out of the game against Alabama. Steve Sarkisian didn't trust Hudson Card to throw the same kind of passes that Quinn Ewers was throwing. What kind of passes are we going to see with Charles Wright? So, look, no one can put an offensive game plan together like Steve Sarkisian. He knows his personnel, and he usually has a lot of firepower early in games and that 20-play script that he has. But this is going to be a test, and it's really going to be a test of all of these players' ability to turn their opponents into nameless, faceless robots and go play to their own standard, Taylor.
Right. Yeah. And I do think that the game plan changed a little bit with Hudson Card coming in too. I feel like Steve Sarkisian mainly changed it in the second half when Hudson Card went down with an injury that first series in the third quarter. And then, it's asking a lot of a quarterback to plant their feet if they can't put a lot of weight on one of their legs and try to attempt those deep ball shots. And so that's why I think it changed. But I would say one thing that you have to consider here, even though Charles Wright has been on campus for, this is second year at Texas, second season in this offense, the thing that you have to remember is the big thing in fall camp, they want to get the depth chart settled, especially at quarterback, at least like 2 weeks in, to make sure that they can get into a rhythm. And even with the starters, and even at that point, the backups don't get many opportunities to be with the starters. And I can promise you the third string does not get those same type of quality reps with the starting offense, especially in scrimmage situations. So that is a hindrance, and it happens to any team out there. It's a hindrance. You want to get your quarterback up to speed with the guys that are going to be on the field with him as much as possible and as early as possible in fall camp. So this is going to be a challenge. I would be surprised if they're going to be slinging it around if Charles Wright is the quarterback. But, Chip, when you're talking about Frank Harris, UTSA's quarterback, guess who leads the country in total offense right now?
Frank Harris.
Frank Harris, total offense. In FBS college football. He is the leader right now. He has, let's see here, he's averaging 394.5 yards per game. He is averaging I'm pulling up the stats here. So he's already thrown for almost 700 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. I mean, this is an elite quarterback that I don't think a lot of people are probably giving as much credit as he deserves at this point. But if you look at, in comparison to other FBS quarterbacks, he's at the top in the country in total offense. That's scary.
Yeah, he had a play against Army where he got sacked on first down, and it was 2nd and 18. And he ran and got it. It kept a touchdown drive alive that UTSA absolutely had to have. And he's got that it quality that scares you, because he gets better as the game gets tighter. He gets better the closer it gets to the end, and he finds ways to win games. That's why I was personally a little surprised when they lost to Houston overtime. That's a veteran Houston team that's trying to be Cincinnati, and they just lost in a thriller to Texas Tech. I know Dana Holgerson's upset about that. But that Houston team, they have a veteran fifth-year quarterback, skill players, the works. And Frank Harris was toe-to-toe and missed an open receiver on they were in triple overtime against Houston, so they were to the point where they were having to convert 2-point conversions. Frank missed an open tight end underneath that would have been an easy pass for that 2-point conversion. And Traylor said that he, beat himself up about that and has just sort of come back with a vengeance. So I think Texas fans are going to really enjoy watching Jeff Traylor's team because it plays so hard and they play good football. They throw it. They throw it more than they run it right now, and that's not really how Traylor likes it. But Sincere McCormick, the running back for UTSA, 1,000-yard rusher, is in the NFL now. And so, as I mentioned, Traylon Smith, the transfer from Arkansas, has come in and he's been solid for them. And they've got the issues on the offensive line, but they're better than Traylor thought on defense. They brought in a couple of transfers, one from LSU. Um, they brought in Nick Troy Fortune from West Virginia's secondary, and he's starting in UTSA secondary. And Traylor we know he can recruit. I mean, you go
Oh
get
yeah.
Traylon Smith from Arkansas, who was playing for that Arkansas team last year that won double-digit victories. That's a pull right there. So this is going to be a fun game. And again, if Texas is on all of its attention to detail and focused in like they were for Alabama, I think Texas wins this game by 10 points. But if they make mistakes, UTSA will hang around and this thing will be a one possession game.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of scary situation for Texas. And the thing that's kind of wild, Chip, is you and I talked about this being a game that you can't overlook before the
Right.
injuries occurred on Texas. I mean, we've been talking all offseason for a reason because I think both you and I would agree that we believe in what Jeff Traylor is. He's a great recruiter, as you mentioned, and he's a quality guy and people follow him. And I mean, shoot, I joked with you behind the scenes, and I'll say it now here, is I wonder if Jeff Traylor's looking at this game as like, hey, this may be a future job, resume builder if the Texas job ever does come back open for him to be like, hey, I'm worth this type of thing. And I know I'm joking. I'm not saying that that should happen or anytime soon or anything like that. But when we saw this game be scheduled, like, man, this may be something that he could put on his resume if in the future the Texas head coaching job ever comes open. But yeah, I mean, this is I don't feel great about this. What do you? I mean, I don't want to be Debbie Downer because I know it probably sounds that way, especially with how harsh we were about Texas leading up to the Alabama game. I just feel like this is a really talented team that a lot of people may not be giving as much credit where credit is due, and I hope that the people that are not doing that are Texas players for a Texas sake, because if they're overlooking this team, this could be brutal.
Yeah. Well, I'll give it to Keandre Coburn. He's the one who came in and said that UTSA was the best team in the state of Texas last year, and we're going to treat them like Alabama. If that's true, then Steve Sarkisian has gotten through to his players, and they are now a different team. They are now at a point where they're mature enough, they're connected enough, where they're taking that winner's approach of all business, and you don't relax after a win. You double down and you make sure that you get that feeling again and again and again, because everyone walked away from that Alabama game saying, well, if Texas plays like that the next 8-9 games, they're gonna be 11-1. Well, now you're gonna do it with your third string quarterback, perhaps. And then you got to try and get Hudson Card back for Texas Tech and West Virginia, and hope that Quinn Ewers maybe is back for OU, which is 4 weeks for that injury, that sternoclavicular joint sprain, which 4 weeks is typically the minimum recovery time for that injury. So the good news is it was not a broken clavicle, which when you first saw that hit from Dallas Turner on Quinn Ewers, you thought, oh, geez, his collarbone just got crunched, which would be a season ending or 12-week type of situation. So at least it's not that. And with Hudson Card, they can spin the red blood cells and inject it into that ankle and try and get that to heal faster. But still, high ankle sprain, 2 weeks kind of minimum to be able to like operate on it after the swelling goes down. So, a couple things, Taylor, from that Alabama game to touch on the punter Daniel Trejo. Remember, Jeff Banks said, "We're bringing in a transfer punter." Well, that's Daniel Trejo from Texas Wesleyan College. So give it to Jeff Banks to go look under a rock and find Daniel Trejo from Texas Wesleyan. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Texas Wesleyan before I just mentioned that. But Daniel Trejo is looking pretty good right now because he finished the Alabama game with a 46-yard average, 46.4-yard average, and that is right where Cameron Dicker was a year ago. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be able to sustain that, but that's impressive and a whole lot better than what we saw on Daniel Trejo's first punt, which went 37 yards. So,
Right. Well, and you have to think this is what makes Jeff Banks knows punters. He was wasn't he an All-American punter? Yeah, at Washington State as a player, and he is just an elite special teams coordinator for this reason. He's able to see and spot deficiencies that could become a much bigger issue as time wears on, and tackle it. And he's a great recruiter too. So I mean, he's just one of those guys that you've said it before. He was a monkey bite away from potentially being the head coach at Washington State, but this is that's what makes him so good. He's able to acknowledge some deficiencies and then address them in a way that many people would not be able to. I don't how you said, I don't know if many people would think to go to Texas Wesleyan to try to get a transfer punter.
yeah, he knows where to look. He said he's got little scouts on the
Little
East
birds.
Coast, West Coast who look for guys who can help. And Daniel Trejo is a guy who can help right now. So obviously there were some other, um, really breakthrough performances in that Alabama game. We mentioned Jalen Ford after kind of getting out of position on the 81-yard run, coming to life really when they sent him on that blitz and he got the sack. And he just played on fire after that. Had 10 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, that sack. They need him to continue playing like that. Austin Jordan. Remember that name, folks, because with Deshaun Jameson out for this game coming up against UTSA, Jameer Johnson and Austin Jordan, the freshman, probably going to rotate at corner. So Austin Jordan, Jalen Gilbo, these guys, these freshmen have shown no fear and have made some plays. And that's anytime you can see that happening as a freshman, man, that's a positive sign. That's the way it was in the early 2000s, Taylor. Seemed like every time you turn around, a Rod Babers, a Nathan Vasher were emerging, and they just started handing it off to each other on their way to becoming DBU. So maybe there's some and Jade Barron, who we got to talk to this week, who's a big time talker. His teammates are all like, "Oh yeah, he never stops talking." So Jade Barron is another guy. And Taylor, what did you think about Bijan Robinson getting all of his teammates some custom burnt orange Beats headphones?
That's awesome. I mean, I honestly, I kind of missed that last week leading up to the Alabama game because there were so many other things that we were kind of working on. But yeah, like when he was, asked about that, and I just think that's so special because it's something that this is a. I mean, I don't even know. Is he even 21 years old yet?
I don't
Maybe
think so.
21.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and he's obviously making a lot of money on his name, image, and likeness, and rightfully so. I mean, he is a very marketable type of guy that can profit off of that in a way that a lot of people will never be able to, honestly. And so I thought it was so cool that he's just these are the little things that we talk about when Steve Sarkisian talks about he's a better person than he is a football player, and that's saying a lot. It's little things like this. Like I don't know how many 20, 21-year-olds are thinking, hey, I have all of this money that I'm making. Let me go and buy $350 headphones for 120 people on my team just to show appreciation for them. A custom one, I mean, that's the retail price on those. I don't know what custom ones go for, but that's just one of those things that you don't have to do. And I don't necessarily think he did it for us to be talking about it. I think he just genuinely did it because he wanted to treat the guys on the team. And this is where I will say this: when it came to NIL stuff, I think a lot of the concern, or some people's concern, that, and it was something that I thought about, would be how, if there's one guy, in the locker room making tons of money, and other people are out there doing, putting in just the same amount of work, the same amount of effort, even like starters, say offensive linemen, like they're not getting the type of NIL deals that, regardless who you are, that like a skill player or a running back or a quarterback is going to get. And that was always something where it's like, is this going to cause locker room division? But I feel like maybe it's too soon to say this, but I think I may have been way wrong, and all of us may have been way wrong in thinking that if this is how people approach NIL. And so Bijan Robinson sets a very high standard for it. Obviously, he sets a very high standard in everything that he does, but I thought it was really cool. I mean, what was your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bijan Robinson is the exception to the rule. He's a special, special guy. I hope he has an unbelievable NFL career, because you know how they always say you give someone money, they become more of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
If they're a jerk, they become more of a jerk. If they're a really good person, they become more of a really good person. Well, Bijan Robinson's the kind of guy you want him to make all the money in the world because he's going to be more of a good person.
Right.
And it's fun to be around him. It really is. I can't remember being around a guy like that. Like it was kind of ha funny to be around Ricky Williams, but Ricky was very private. He wasn't letting you in. Bijan is letting you in. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when we're around him, he lets you in, and it's really refreshing to see a guy that comfortable with who he is, with what he's about, and with that much confidence, and of course in his abilities, but and also being a generous spirit. And so I thought it was fantastic, and it really touched his teammates, which you could tell when we were talking to them on Monday. So good stuff there. Taylor, you ready for some love it or leave it?
I am. Before we get to love it or leave it, we're going to take a really quick break, but stick around because we have plenty more to cover as Texas prepares to face UTSA Saturday at home in the final non-conference game of the regular season. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will continue on here. Chip, you ready for the first love it or leave it?
Let's go.
First one is love it or leave it. Texas quarterback injuries will force the team to focus that much more this week, and will result in a max effort from the Longhorns against UTSA.
You know what? I'm gonna ride the wave here. I'm gonna ride the wave that came out of the Crimson Tide and say, I'm gonna love this. I'm gonna buy that this team can sustain what they started on last Saturday. That we talk about it all the time here on the Flagship Podcast. The sign of a well-coached team is week to week improvement. Okay, well then we need to see improvement from that Alabama game. And I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and believe that the playmakers are going to make plays, that Xavier Worthy is going to make plays for Charles Wright. Jordan Whittington's going to make plays for Charles Wright, Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson, and that the defense, which played so well in making life miserable for Bryce Young and Alabama, can do the same to Frank Harris and Traylon Smith and these three talented UTSA playmaker receivers. Because you can argue that, Alabama had some drops. I don't think UTSA's receivers are going to be dropping passes. So I'm gonna love this, Taylor. That's a little bit of a leap of faith because we have not seen Texas over the last decade sustain level of play when they go up to play an elite opponent and then have to come down to play a group of five opponent, even though UTSA doesn't play like no group of five. Taylor, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to also love it. I feel like we have seen a lot more of a different mindset, and it's probably the culture. Honestly, it's probably what we're actually seeing a little bit more, not just on the field, but also just in talking to the players. They said it all off season, and I think I had been like, okay, I know that this is the talking point for this off season, so let's see it actually, show up on the field on Saturdays. And I do feel like so far it has. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt in this. I think that this team understands that just because you almost upset the number one team in the country does not mean that you've arrived in any way, shape, or form, or that you can just coast on through the rest of the schedule. I don't think that Steve Sarkisian would allow that type of mentality, especially after last season with how many, kind of issues, adversity that struck, and the locker room kind of became fractured because of certain players that weren't bought in. So I think all of that combined, I think is going to lead to the max effort here. And then in addition to that, I think that you need the max effort from the fans too, because if you hear Will Anderson say that playing at 11 o'clock in the morning at Texas was one of the craziest, hardest environments that he's ever been when he's playing in the SEC week in and week out against, in stadiums that I feel like the majority are all 100,000 plus capacity, their own, sell out games every single week. And he's saying that about Texas. That says something that the fans really can impact this. And I hope they recognize it, because obviously, if you can get an Alabama, a Bryce Young, a Will Anderson to shake them, because the atmosphere is so hostile that it's hard to even think straight, let alone hear anything, going on with communication tactics on the field. That's huge. So I think that Texas fans need to bring it too. And I think that if I thought the scene after the Alabama game was really, really neat. Chip, like seeing the fans just cheering for a team that just lost. I mean, it's honestly kind of bone chilling a little bit, because I haven't seen that from Texas fans. A lot of times you see them flooding out of the stadium, if they're like going to lose, not staying around. And that was electric. And I had tweeted something about it over the weekend, and I'm really glad Texas football actually had a video that they posted after I initially tweeted it, because I was so in awe with how Texas fans just stayed to support that team after a loss. And then they tweeted a video of the scene I was trying to describe. And it's just amazing. I mean, I sent it to my dad, and, we're not a family of moral victories, you know what I mean? Or anything like that. Like, if you don't win, you lose. And it's all, that's the end all be all. If you don't win, you lose. If you're not first, you're last. So I sent it to him, and I was like, this is after the loss. And he was like, he didn't believe me. He's like, wait, after they lost, that's what the fans were doing? I was like, yes. And so I think that if the fans can bring it like that week in and week out, you're going to see a different product on the field, because it's obviously going to impact them. And then you're, with a UTSA team that I would be shocked if they play in many stadiums of 100,000 capacity or even close to it. And this is just something that can really be a dynamic weapon that Texas has at its disposal if the fans bring that type of energy each week inside DKR. So yeah, I'm going to love it.
Yeah, Christian Jones said it was the first time he'd seen that new South End, where that Longhorn is, full.
Yeah.
It's usually always empty because the people are always downstairs in the bar. Mm-hmm. But they were actually in their seats watching the game because it was such a good game. So, yeah. All right, love it or leave it, number 2.
Number 2 is love it or leave it. It makes sense. The betting line for Saturday's Texas UTSA game has dropped from Texas by 13.5 points down to 11 points.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to love this. I said a good performance by Texas would mean a 10-point win. Now, if UTSA makes mistakes and turns the ball over, then it could be a 2-touchdown win. But I see this as like a good Texas performance is a 10-point win, and a less than exemplary performance from Texas could leave them in a one possession game. So I get this. I mean, this this line, I, I I saw it and I thought, yeah, people are gonna, the sharp money, the whatever the casinos, they're gonna they're gonna put their money on UTSA, and it looks like that's what's happening here. So um, I'm gonna love this, Taylor. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to love it. I think anytime that you have a quarterback injury, you expect the lines to move. If you have potentially your starter and second string up in the air or questionable going up to this game, then for sure. I mean, this makes sense. I don't think it's a knock on Texas or anything. And quite frankly, if you're a Texas fan, you better hope that Vegas keeps getting it wrong. Because remember, Texas was a 21-point underdog to Alabama, and they stunned everybody in Vegas. So keep taking that money from the casinos there because they make enough clearly. But yeah, no, this makes total sense. It's no surprise to me. Injury reports are huge, especially when it impacts betting lines. I don't like to bet on sports. I don't like to bet at all. Unless I know 1,000% I'm going to win, and you never know in sports, so I don't bet. But it makes sense why this would shift, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's no definitive answer on who's going to be, announced by Steve Sarkisian of who's going to be entering this game. I wouldn't be surprised if it moves even more.
Yeah. All right, love it or leave it. Number 3.
Final one for you. Love it or leave it. The biggest key to the game Saturday will be Texas defense continuing to play at the level it did against Alabama.
Yeah, I would say I'm gonna love this, the biggest key, because the Texas defense, which had so much room for improvement after last year, showed so much improvement against Alabama and affected the game in a way that you want to see your defense affect the game. Pressure on the quarterback, hurried throws, sacks, big time plays on third down. If this defense can build on that and continue to do that, this Texas team is going to be really, really hard to beat. And who knows? I mean, if they could win this game, get through these quarterback injuries, uh, somehow find a way to win out in Lubbock. That's a 2:30 game now. It's not a 7 o'clock game, which is always good news. For you want that game as early as possible. You want an 11 a.m. game out in Lubbock, but um, Texas got to find a way to win against UTSA and Texas Tech before coming back home to face West Virginia. But if you can keep winning despite these quarterback injuries, this team's going to, their belief tank and confidence tank is going to start filling up, and they're going to be a team headed in the right direction finally. And that's something that Texas fans have been waiting for on a consistent basis for over a decade. So, real opportunity right here for this Texas team to start pushing that arrow up. And I really do believe it starts with the defense. That's where you've got the most experience, you've got the most depth, and you've got, you've got an injury to Deshaun Jameson. He's been a playmaker for sure, but you've got good young talent coming in behind him. I'm going to love this, Taylor. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to love it. The defense is crucial in this game. I mean, the defense is crucial in every game. I mean, the saying defense wins championships is not just some coach speak type of thing. It's the reality. I mean, how many times Tom Herman said it till he was blue in the face? How many times did a team win the college football playoff title or national championship that had a bad defense? Not many, like at all. And it's true. It is true. So if the Texas defense can continue playing the way that they have for the first 2 games, limiting trips to the end zone, I think is the biggest thing. Scoring defense is huge, and Texas is doing pretty well in scoring defense so far, and especially after facing the number 1 team in the country. And they're still, I think what is it, 15 points they're averaging or allowing per game. I mean, you'll take that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I mean, my goodness, compared to the last several years, honestly, the Texas defense. So yeah, I think the defense is the biggest key to the game on Saturday. It's going to determine so much of the final outcome, and if they can continue rolling the way that they did against Alabama, then Texas, this is probably a better chance that Texas have against a UTSA team, even if they're in a position to be on their third string quarterback.
Yeah, I said a successful year in 2022 would be 8 wins in Arch Manning. They got that commitment from Arch Manning in the summer. And if they can continue to build on that Alabama performance, I may have lowballed them on
They may have sold them short.
I may have sold them short on the 8 wins, but let's see it this Saturday. This is key because you trip and fall in this game, and then all the doubt and all the Texas can't handle prosperity even after a loss.
Yeah. They let the rat poison in.
They let the rat poison in. They went into the top 25 off a loss and lost again. You don't want that conversation anymore. Longhorn Nation is sick of it. So let's see if Steve Sarkisian has put in a culture that is got some real foundation to it. Let's see if it shows up. If that shows up on Saturday night, then we might be onto something here, Taylor. We shall see. All right, good stuff. Thanks everybody for listening to the Flagship Podcast. Until next time, we'll see you at horns247.com. For Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.